Chapter 5 of Bunyip Land. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Bunyip Land by George Manville Fenn. Chapter 5. How We Found Jack Penny. The captain's ideas were not quite correct. Certainly the little trading vessel had been run upon one of the many reefs that spread in all directions along the dangerous coast, but it was not the Malay who was the guilty party. As far as I was concerned, it seemed to me a good job, for it brought the schooner to a standstill so that we could overtake it. No thought occurred to me that the rocks might have knocked a hole in her bottom, and that if a storm came on she would most likely go to pieces. Very little was said now, for everyone's attention was taken up by the threatened hurricane and our efforts to reach the schooner before it should come on. It was a long, severe race in which we all took a turn at the oars, literally rowing, as it seemed to me, for our lives. At times it was as if we must be overtaken by the fierce black clouds in the distance, beneath which there was a long misty white line. The seabirds kept dashing by us, uttering wild cries, and there was overhead an intense silence, while in the distance we could hear a dull, low murmuring roar that told of the coming mischief. Every now and then it seemed to me that we must be overtaken by the long surging line, that it was now plain to see was pursuing us, and I wondered whether we should be able to swim and save our lives when it came upon us with a hiss and a roar, such as I had often heard when on the beach. "We shall never do it," said one of the men, who half jumped from his seat the next moment as the captain leaned forward from where he was rowing and gave him a sound box on the ears. "Pull, you cowardly humbug!" he cried. "Not do it! A set of furriners wouldn't do it, but we're Englishmen, and we're going to do it. If we don't it won't be our fault. Pull!" This trifling incident had its effect, for the men pulled harder than ever, exhausted though they were. It was a struggle for life now, and I knew it, but somehow I did not feel frightened in the least, but stunned and confused, and at the same time interested, as I saw the great line of haze and foam coming on. Then I was listening to the dull roar, which was rapidly increasing in what seemed a harsh yell louder than thunder. "Pull, my lads!" shouted the captain, with his voice sounding strange and harsh in the awful silence around us, for loud as was the roar of the storm, it seemed still afar off. The men pulled, and then we relieved them again, with the great drops gathering on our faces in the intense heat, and my breath came thick and short till I felt as it were a sense of burning in my chest. Then I grew half blind, with my eyes staring back at the wall of haze, and then, as I felt I should die if I strained much longer at that oar, I heard the captain shout, "In oars!" and I found that we were alongside the schooner, and close under her lee. There was just time to get on board, and we were in the act of hauling up the boat when, with an awful whistle and shriek, the storm was upon us, and we were all clinging for life to that which was nearest at hand. Now I dare say you would like me to give you a faithful account of my impressions of that storm, and those of one who went through it from the time that the hurricane struck us till it passed over, leaving the sky clear, the sun shining, and the sea heaving slowly and without a single crest. I feel that I can do justice to the theme, so here is my faithful description of that storm. A horrid, wet, stifling, flogging row. That's all I can recollect. That's all I'm sure that the doctor could recollect, or the captain, or anyone else. We were just about drowned and stunned, and when we came to ourselves it was because the storm had passed over. "What cheer? Ho!" shouted the captain, and we poor flogged and drenched objects sat up and looked about us, to find that the waves had lifted the schooner off the rocks and driven her a long way out of her course, that the sails that had been set were blown to ribbons, and finally that the schooner, with the last exception, was very little the worse for the adventure. "She ain't made no water much," said the captain after going below, "and here, I say, where's that Malay scoundrel?" "Down in the cabin, locked in," said an ill-used voice, and I rubbed the salt water out of my eyes and stared at the tall thin figure before me, leaning up against the bulwark as if his long thin legs were too weak to support his long body, though his head was so small that it could not have added very much weight. "Why, hallo! Who the blue jingo are you?" roared the skipper. The tall thin boy wrinkled up his forehead and did not answer. "Here, I say, where did you spring from?" roared the captain. The tall thin boy took one hand out of his trousers pocket with some difficulty, for it was so wet that it clung, and pointed down below. The skipper scratched his head furiously and stared again. "Here, can't you speak, you long-legged thing?" he cried. "Who are you?" "Why, it's Jack Penny!" I exclaimed. "Jack who?" cried the captain. "Jack Penny, sir. His father is a squatter about 10 miles from our place." "Well, but how come I mean that tall thin chap, not his father, to be squatting aboard my schooner?" "Why, Jack," I said, "when did you come aboard?" "Come aboard?" he said slowly, as if it took him some time to understand what I said. "Oh, the night before you did." "But where have you been all the time?" "Oh, down below there," said Jack slowly. "But what did you come for?" "Wanted to," he said coolly. "If I had said so, you wouldn't have let me come." "But why did you come, Jack?" I said. "'Cause I wanted," he replied surlily. "Who are you that you're to have all the fun and me get none?" "Fun!" I said. "Yes, fun. Ain't you going to find your father?" "Of course I am, but what's that got to do with fun?" "Never you mind. I've come, and that's all about it," he said slowly, and thrusting his hands back into his trousers pockets as fast as the wet clinging stuff would let him, he began to whistle. "But it aren't all about it," cried the captain, "and so you'll find. You aren't paid no passage, and I aren't going to have no liberties took within my ship. Here, where's that Malay chap?" "I told you where he was, didn't I?" snarled Jack Penny. "Are you deaf? In the cabin, locked in." "What's he doing locked in my cabin?" roared the captain. "I say, are you skipper here, or am I? What's he doing in my cabin locked in?" "Rubbing his sore head, I suppose," drawled Jack Penny. "I hit him as hard as I could with one of them fence rails." "Fence rails!" cried the captain, who looked astounded at the big thin boy's coolness, then glanced in the direction he pointed beneath the bulwarks. "Fence rails! What do you mean? One of them capstan bars?" "I don't know what you call 'em," said Jack. "I give him a regular oneer on the head." "What for, you dog?" "Here, don't call me a dog or there'll be a row," cried Jack, rising erect and standing rather shakily, about 5'11", looking like a big boy stretched to the bursting point and then made fast. "He was going to kill the black fellow with his knife after knocking him down. I wasn't going to stand by and see him do that, was I?" "Well, I suppose not," said the captain, who looked puzzled. "Where is the black fellow? Here, where's Jimmy?" "Down that square hole there." that wooden well place," said Jack, pointing to the forecastle hatch.